She stood alone, invisible to everyone, humiliated in front of 1,000 eyes. And then a billionaire whispered, "Pretend to be my wife." Her response, it shocked the elite, and nothing would ever be the same. The charity gala filled the upper floors of a Manhattan landmark, where crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors and designer gowns. This was not just an event. It was a gathering of power. Billionaires exchanged smiles with politicians, celebrities laughed beside hedge fund tycoons, and every movement in the room was quietly measured for status. She arrived alone. No cameras turned, no hands reached out. No one bothered to ask her name. Dressed simply, elegant but understated, she stood out only because she didn't belong to any visible circle. The elites glanced at her once, then looked past her as if she were part of the decor. A woman without a partner, without protection, without value in a room that worshipped appearances. She had learned to stand still in moments like this. Then she heard his voice. Her former fiancé, now a rising figure in the same elite world, laughed loudly near the center of the room. His suit was flawless, his confidence effortless. When his eyes landed on her, recognition flickered, followed by amusement. "Well," he said, not bothering to lower his voice, "some people really don't know when they're out of place." A ripple of laughter followed. Whispers spread, heads turned, phones appeared, subtle, angled, just right. Not to help, to record. Someone murmured, "Who even invited her?" Another voice replied, probably hoping someone important would notice. He took a step closer, smiling cruelly, enjoying the attention. "You always did have bad timing," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "This world moves fast. If you can't keep up, you get left behind." She didn't respond. Her hands tightened at her sides, not in anger, but control. Years ago, she might have defended herself. Tonight, she knew better. In rooms like this, reactions were currency, and humiliation was entertainment. The laughter faded into murmurs, but the damage was done. She stood alone beneath the chandeliers, exposed and shrinking in the eyes of 1,000 strangers. To them, she looked powerless, invisible, forgotten. They thought she was nobody. They didn't know the night was about to rewrite every hierarchy in that room. Once, she had belonged to rooms far grander than this. Years ago, her name alone could open doors. She came from a family that moved quietly among power. Old money, influence that didn't need to announce itself. Private schools, summer homes, invitations that arrived without asking. Protection that followed her like a shadow. And then she chose something reckless. She chose love. He wasn't part of her world. That was what attracted her to him. He spoke about honesty, ambition, building something real. He said he didn't care about wealth or names. With him, she felt seen, not as an asset, but as a person. So she walked away. She distanced herself from her family's control, ignored warnings whispered over late dinners, and refused the safety net that had always been beneath her. She wanted to stand on her own, on equal ground with the man she loved. For a while, it felt worth it. Then success changed him. The same man who once admired her independence began to resent it. The world he entered rewarded ego, not loyalty. He learned how power worked, how to discard people quietly, how to let someone else take the blame, how to step forward while another fell behind. When things went wrong, she was convenient. She became the scapegoat, the one blamed for decisions she never made, the one quietly pushed out of rooms she once helped him enter. When the relationship ended, it wasn't dramatic. It was cold, strategic, final, and she was left with nothing but her name, and even that felt fragile. She didn't fight back, not because she couldn't, but because she learned that dignity was sometimes the only thing left worth keeping. She learned silence, restraint, how to stand tall without demanding attention. Tonight was never meant to be revenge. She didn't come to reclaim anything. She didn't expect justice or apologies. She came because avoiding places like this had already cost her too much. Because running away once had stripped her of everything she believed in. So she stood there now, alone among the powerful, carrying her past quietly, unseen, underestimated, and utterly misunderstood. And she believed this would be just another night where she swallowed the humiliation and went home unnoticed. She was wrong. He had been watching the room, long before he noticed her. From the elevated balcony near the east wing, the billionaire stood apart, untouched by the noise, untouched by the laughter. Power like his didn't need to announce itself. It observed, calculated, waited. Politicians leaned toward him when he passed. CEOs paused mid-sentence, media cameras subtly adjusted angles, hoping for a reaction. Tonight wasn't just a charity gala. It was a battlefield of optics, alliances, and unspoken negotiations. And he was at the center of it. Yet his eyes weren't on the stage, or the donors, or the familiar faces trying too hard to impress him. They were on her. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, alone, shoulders straight, chin lifted just enough to hide the weight pressing down on her chest. Laughter rippled nearby, her name whispered with amusement, her past reduced to gossip. Most people in her position would have cracked. She didn't. There was no outrage, no tears, no attempt to defend herself. Just silence, controlled, dignified, dangerous in its restraint. She looked like someone who had already lost everything, and survived it. That was when his interest sharpened. At the same moment, pressure tightened around him. Across the room, rival board members whispered to reporters. A senator's aide watched him too closely. The absence of a woman at his side, tonight of all nights, was becoming a problem. Rumors had already started. Questions about stability, about legacy, about whether a man with no family could be trusted with power that shaped nations. He needed a solution, fast, not a model, not a socialite, not someone who would play a role and demand a future in return. He needed someone real, someone who wouldn't flinch under scrutiny, someone the room had already underestimated. He descended the stairs quietly and crossed the ballroom without urgency. When he stopped beside her, she didn't notice at first. Power like his didn't interrupt. It entered. He leaned slightly, close enough that only she could hear him. "Pretend to be my wife," he whispered calmly. "Just for tonight." The words hit her like ice water. She turned, shock flickering across her face before discipline pulled it back. Of all the things she expected this evening, this wasn't one of them. Not from him, not from anyone like him. She shook her head almost instinctively. No. She had already paid the price for being used once. "I can't," she said quietly. "You don't even know me." His gaze didn't waver. "I know enough," he replied. "You don't beg, you don't perform, and you don't break." Around them the room continued breathing, laughing, judging, dismissing. None of them noticed that something irreversible had just been set in motion. She didn't realize it yet, but that whisper, spoken in the shadow of humiliation, was about to collapse reputations, rewrite power dynamics, and expose truths that had been buried too long, and the elite would never see it coming. She didn't answer immediately. For a few seconds, she simply looked at him. Really looked at him. Not at the tailored suit, not at the quiet authority that bent the room around him, but at the man himself. The kind of man who was used to people saying yes before he finished speaking. She wasn't one of them. "I won't pretend," she said softly at last. For the first time that night, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, not offense. Interest. "I don't lie for free," she continued, her voice calm enough to be mistaken for indifference. "And I don't belong to anyone's narrative." He waited. Powerful men didn't interrupt when something rare was unfolding. "If I stand beside you," she said, "it's not as decoration. No touching without consent, no stories about my past. And when tonight ends, it ends cleanly." A pause. Then she added the line that shifted the balance completely. "And one more thing," she said, meeting his gaze without fear. "If anyone in this room disrespects me again, you don't defend me, you make them regret it." The air between them changed. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't gratitude. This was negotiation. Sharp, precise, fearless. She wasn't asking to be saved. She was setting terms. Slowly, the billionaire smiled. Not the kind meant for cameras, but the kind reserved for equals. "Deal," he said simply. He extended his arm. Not as an order, as an invitation. When she placed her hand on his arm and stepped forward with him, the room reacted instantly. Conversations stalled. Eyes followed. Phones lowered in confusion. The woman who had been invisible moments ago now walked at the center of gravity itself. Whispers erupted. "Who is she? Since when is he married? Why didn't we know?" Her ex froze mid-laugh. The people who had mocked her moments earlier straightened, suddenly uncertain. Power had shifted, and no one could explain how. As they reached the center of the ballroom, he leaned slightly toward her again. "You're very calm," he murmured. She smiled, small, controlled, unshaken. "I've already survived losing everything once," she replied. "Tonight can't hurt me." That was the moment he understood. She wasn't stepping into his world. She was rewriting it. And the elite, who had spent the evening measuring worth by money and status, were about to learn a brutal lesson. The woman they dismissed was the most dangerous person in the room. They didn't rush back in. That alone unsettled people. When the billionaire and the woman re-entered the ballroom side by side, it felt deliberate, measured, unhurried, as if the entire room was now waiting for them. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors, but the real spotlight had shifted. Whispers rippled first, then stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses hovered in the air. The elites, people who built their lives on reading power instantly, felt something was wrong, very wrong. Eyes tracked them from every angle. Phones that had been raised earlier, now lowered, unsure. Smiles appeared, too late, too forced. The woman walked with her chin level, her posture effortless. Not arrogance, not performance. The kind of calm that comes from knowing you don't need approval anymore. Her former humiliators saw her first. The ex who had laughed earlier stiffened, his expression draining as if someone had pulled the ground from under him. The people who had whispered her name with contempt now whispered it with confusion. "Who is she? Since when does he have a wife? Why didn't we know?" The billionaire stopped at the center of the ballroom. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I apologize for the interruption," he said calmly, his tone cutting through the room more effectively than any microphone. "But I realized something important tonight." Silence. He turned slightly toward her, "And I won't allow it to be misunderstood." His hand rested lightly at her back. Not possessive, not performative, protective, intentional. "This," he said, "is my wife." The effect was immediate. Gasps, sharp inhales, the kind of shock people try and fail to hide. Faces rearrange themselves in real time, power recalculated. Social hierarchies cracked. Her ex's smile collapsed completely. A few people laughed nervously, unsure if this was a joke. It wasn't. The billionaire continued, his gaze sweeping the room slowly. Anyone who disrespects her, he added evenly, disrespects me. No threat, no theatrics, just fact. The shift was almost visible. Those who had ignored her earlier stepped forward too quickly, eager, embarrassed. Compliments surfaced where insults had lived moments ago. Invitations were suddenly extended. Apologies floated, half-formed, cowardly. She noticed everything and responded to nothing. She didn't smile. She didn't acknowledge the sudden warmth. Her silence was louder than any speech. The elite understood something terrifying in that moment. She hadn't gained power by standing beside him. She had revealed the emptiness of theirs. As the music resumed awkwardly and the gala attempted to recover, one truth settled over the room. Like a verdict, the woman they erased had returned, not to beg for recognition, but to redefine it. The billionaire didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse anyone outright. Instead, he smiled slightly and accepted the microphone that had been offered too eagerly. "Since we're all gathered," he said calmly, "I think it's a good moment to clarify a few misunderstandings." The word misunderstandings made several people uncomfortable. A screen behind the stage flickered to life. No dramatic music, no warning, just facts. Documents appeared versed. Clean, professional, unmistakable. Financial records, partnership transfers, dates, signatures. The woman didn't react, she already knew. The former fiancé felt it before he understood it. His body stiffened, instinctively stepping back as if distance could save him. The billionaire continued, his tone almost conversational. "Tonight I watched a woman be disrespected," he said. Not loudly, not violently, quietly, systematically. Images changed. Old photos surfaced. Cropped articles, gala invitations from years ago. The woman, younger, standing beside the same man who had mocked her earlier. Headlines followed. Rising star CEO, supported by private investor. Sudden buyout raises questions. Whispers returned, but sharper now. Fear replaced amusement. She was removed, the billionaire went on, from companies she helped build, from circles she introduced, from opportunities she earned. A pause. Not because she failed. The next slide appeared. Legal filings, NDAs, quiet settlements, a timeline that told the story without emotion. She was removed because someone else wanted credit without accountability. All eyes turned. The former fiancé's face drained of color. His mistress, once smug, looked around desperately, realizing no one was meeting her gaze anymore. Phones were no longer recording her. They were recording him. The media, sharp and predatory, sensed blood. Reporters checked names, cross-referenced files. Social feeds updated in real time. The narrative flipped. Just an hour ago, the woman had been a nobody. Now she was a missing chapter. The billionaire stepped away from the screen. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone," he said evenly. "I came to correct a record." That was worse. Because records don't argue back. Security shifted subtly. Lawyers whispered urgently. Invitations, reputations, board seats, all suddenly fragile. The elites understood something too late. This wasn't revenge. It was documentation. The former fiancé tried to laugh it off. The sound came out wrong, thin, desperate. No one joined him. Because real power doesn't scream. It archives. And as the truth unraveled live, quiet, undeniable, permanent. The room realized they weren't watching a scandal. They were watching a correction. The confrontation didn't happen under chandeliers. It happened in a quiet corridor behind the ballroom, where the noise of power couldn't reach. He followed her there. Not confidently, not angrily, desperately. "Wait," he said, his voice cracking for the first time that night. "Please, just listen." She stopped, but didn't turn around. For years, she had waited for him to speak like this. Now she felt nothing. He took a step closer, hands shaking. The man who once mocked her in public now couldn't even meet her eyes. "I didn't know," he said quickly. "I swear I didn't know who you really were. If I had—" That's when she turned, slowly, calmly. "That's the problem," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "You only valued me if I came with proof." He tried to interrupt. She raised one finger, not in threat, but in finality. "You didn't lose me tonight," she continued. "You lost me the day you decided my silence meant I was small." His face collapsed. "I loved you," he whispered. She studied him for a moment, not with anger, but with clarity. "No," she said gently. "You loved how safe I made you feel. You loved being admired beside me. But you never loved me." The words landed harder than any insult. "I stood alone tonight," she went on, "and you thought that meant I had nothing. But I stood alone because I refused to become like you." Tears welled in his eyes. He reached out instinctively. She stepped back. "This isn't revenge," she said. "If it were, I'd stay and watch you fall." She picked up her clutch. "But I don't need that." She looked at him one last time, not as an enemy, not as a victim, but as someone already left behind. "You taught me something valuable," she said. "That dignity doesn't require witnesses." Then she walked away. No music swelled. No final insult followed. Just the sound of her heels fading, steady, unbroken. And for the first time, he understood the truth. She hadn't won because he was exposed. She won because she chose not to become him. They walked out of the ballroom together. Not as a spectacle, not as a statement, but as equals. For months, whispers had followed him. Why her? Why now? Why would a billionaire, a man used to power, choose someone who had been humiliated in front of the city's elite? He stopped on the terrace, overlooking the skyline, and finally spoke. "I didn't choose you because it looked good," he said quietly, voice almost lost in the wind. "I chose you because you were the only one who didn't bend for me. The only one who stood with honesty, dignity, and clarity, even when the world laughed." She listened, arms crossed, yet calm. Not flattered, not naive, just observing. "You could have left," he continued. "You could have stayed angry, vengeful, bitter, but you didn't. You acted with integrity. That is rare." She let a small, almost imperceptible smile touch her lips. "I never needed a fairy tale," she said softly. "I needed someone who could recognize strength without trying to dominate it." He nodded. "And that's why I needed you by my side. Not because you complete me, but because you challenge me. Because together, we respect the same values. Because together we can face the world without pretending to be anyone else." For the first time that night, neither of them sought to control the other. Neither needed to prove superiority. It wasn't romance in the movies. It wasn't fireworks or dramatic declarations. It was far more powerful. A quiet understanding. A partnership built on respect, trust, and shared strength. She finally reached for his hand, but not as a gesture of submission, as a gesture of choice. Two powerful people standing together, not over each other, but with each other. And for the first time in years, the world outside could not touch their dignity. The night ended without applause, without cameras, without spectacle. Just quiet, shared strength, and the knowledge that real power doesn't roar. It simply exists. Months had passed since that night at the gala. The city hadn't forgotten, but she had moved beyond needing their recognition. She walked into events no longer with trepidation, no longer shrinking in corners. It wasn't wealth that gave her confidence. It was the knowledge of her own value, the lessons carved into her soul from humiliation, restraint, and quiet strength. The elite whispered, "Of course, they always do." But this time they whispered respect, and perhaps a little fear. She glanced across the room. Faces that once mocked her now measured her. Some tried to reclaim lost influence, some attempted charm. She smiled softly. Not arrogance, but clarity. She saw them, but she no longer needed them. Whether she was alone or beside him, she carried herself with calm authority. Not because she sought attention, but because she deserved none. The world had shifted its tone. The invisible had become impossible to ignore. And in that quiet, personal victory, she understood the truth. No power in the room could diminish her, because she had discovered her own. She walked into the room, alone. She walked out knowing she would never disappear again. The past had tried to define her. The elites had tried to erase her. The world had whispered doubts in her ears. But she had rewritten the rules, and now every step she took was hers, unapologetic, unshakable, unstoppable. Her story wasn't just about revenge or wealth or social recognition. It was about self-respect, courage, and claiming the space she had always deserved. And in that, she found freedom that no gala, no crowd, no whisper could ever take away.